Welcome, everyone, to the True Crime Breakdown. Today we are wrapping up the case of Phoebe Handsjuk, who tragically died after falling 12 stories down a garbage chute at the apartment tower she lived in Melbourne, Australia, in 2010. We will cover the police investigation, go over the evidence gathered, and I will give you my best guess on what happened and who might be responsible. So if you haven't listened to episode 4, which is the first part of this case, please do so. You can find my podcast at all the usual places, Apple Podcasts and Spotify included. You can also listen to full episodes right from my website at truecrimebreakdown.com. Just go to the episode link and choose the episode you want to hear. So without further ado, let's start the breakdown. When we last left the Balancia Tower apartment in Melbourne, it was in quite a state. Phoebe's body had been found in the garbage compactor room, and police, forensic, and EMTs were on the scene. Her boyfriend Anthony, who we will call Ant, had already spoken with the investigator in charge, Sergeant Healy. Sergeant Healy had went up to Ant and Phoebe's apartment. Then they returned to the crime scene. At this point, Ant is back in his apartment with another officer who is looking it over for clues. At 8 p.m. that evening, Detective Sergeant Mark Butterworth from the Piranha Task Force arrived and took over command at the scene. He was a veteran of high-profile murders, such as the 1998 Melbourne gangland killings. As soon as he arrived, he was briefed by Healy and the other officers on scene. He was informed that blood had been found on the floor of the refuse room on the 12th floor. This would have been the one that Phoebe and Ant would use to dispose of their garbage. Blood was also found in elevators and the B1 section of the car garbage area. He was informed that a carpenter had cut himself and that the blood in one of these elevators and parking garage were probably his. This is what Butterworth saw when he entered the compactor room. The body of a young woman lying face up near the doorway. Her jeans were pulled down below her knees. She had sustained a severe injury to her right foot. Looking past the body, he noted that of the 5 bins which rotated below the garbage chute, one had fallen and was lying on the floor near the body. Around the bin carousel, he could see a large amount of smeared blood. As he stood there, garbage bags continued to fly out of the garbage chute with a bang. Butterworth designated Eric and Tony Bazell, the building supervisor, to immediately shut down all the rubbish rooms in the apartment. He proceeded to put up signs explaining that the garbage chutes were out of order. Sergeant Healy then informed Butterworth about the conversations he had had with Ant and what he had seen on his apartment, specifically the broken glass, the blood on the floor, and the blood drops found in the 12th floor refuse room. Butterworth was then informed by Constable Gareth Howells that he had noticed large dirty footprints or boot prints leading away from Phoebe's apartment. Unfortunately, these were never followed up on or even photographed. He was also told about the 2 false fire alarms, and Tony stated that he had seen Phoebe during the evacuation and that she had appeared normal. Tom, Phoebe's brother, and Len, her dad, headed over to the Balancia. They were met outside the front door of the tower by law enforcement. Len immediately asked to see Phoebe's body and was told he would have to wait. And after half an hour, Detective Stephen Cooper escorted them both to the Kilda Road police station, where they were placed in separate rooms and told to wait for the police to take their statements. Can we see how this is different from the way that the police handled Ant? He was never even taken down to the police station to get a statement. Len and Tom basically told Detective Cooper the same story. They laid out how Phoebe had led a troubled life and had issues with alcohol, that Len had referred her to a psychiatrist, and then he thought she was taking antidepressants. This information dovetailed with the reports he was getting from the Ant interview, which stated she had self-harmed and had recently taken ecstasy. The police also had an interview with Christo von Egmond. He was one of Ant's close friends and also lived in the building. Christo stated that he had arrived home at 8:30 and went up to his apartment. He asked his neighbors what all the commotion was downstairs and was told that Phoebe had been found dead. Christo told police that he and Ant had been at a meeting together in the city between 3 and 4:30 p.m., and he had asked Ant for a ride back to the apartment complex. But Ant had told him he couldn't since he was going back to his office. While Phoebe's family was being interviewed, Senior Constable Bernard Carrick was back at the Balancia, processing the crime scene. He noted the following. The body was lying on the floor with apparent injuries to the legs and the right foot. Next to the body was found a garbage bin lying on its side that contained blood, a single lens from a pair of Prada sunglasses, and a pharmacy blister pack of Diabetics 1000. Upon examination, the waste compactor at the bottom of the garbage chute, Carrick found blood inside it and on the compactor's door. The waste compactor's job was to chop up the garbage as it came down the chute. and then compress it so more could be fit into the bins. Carrick noted that the waste compactor's operation switch was set to automatic. This meant that it would run on its own, chopping up the garbage in the chute whenever the garbage bins became full. Carrick then processed the apartment elevator and took samples of blood from the push-button panel and the elevator floor. When he reached the 12th floor, he entered the refuse room and took samples from blood drops on the concrete floor. He proceeded to Aunt and Phoebe's apartment. In his report, he describes the apartment as a 2-bedroom apartment with a study and an outdoor balcony. I have included pictures of the interior on the website so you can get an idea of what the scene looked like. Carrick noted that there was a ripped-up cushion. In the master bedroom, he found Phoebe's journal on the bed and bagged it for evidence. In the home office, he found blood on the door jamb, desktop, and the computer mouse. He collected evidence of broken glass fragments in the hallway. In his report, there was no mention of any type of shrine that Aunt had talked about in his statement. Detective Sergeant Butterworth returned to the apartment complex and recorded the following observations as they removed Phoebe's body from the compactor room at 2:45 a.m. He had observed that she was a slim female with black hair. She was wearing blue jeans which were undone and pulled down. She was wearing a gray t-shirt and not wearing shoes. Her right foot was almost severed, only hanging on by a couple of tendons. She had lacerations on her buttocks, legs, and back. He also noticed a pair of damaged Prada sunglasses. Constable Martin Kozlowski, law enforcement's fingerprint expert, checked the 12th floor rubbish room, the door of the chute, and the door to the first floor compactor room, and various places in the room itself. But, for some reason, he was unable to find any usable prints. Phoebe's family reacted to the news of her death as expected. They were shocked. The sudden death of a healthy 24-year-old hits hard. They reacted with sadness, anguish, and disbelief. The way she died was also unbelievable to those who knew her. Sure, they knew she was a free spirit, but never did they expect her to commit suicide. The next day on Friday at 11, members of Phoebe's family, including her parents Len and Natalie, Tom, Nick, and Jeanette, and Natalie's brother Matt, traveled to the morgue to view Phoebe's body. They made several attempts to contact Aunt and have him with them, but Aunt's mom answered his phone and told him that he was resting. He does not join them at the morgue. The family arrives at the morgue and are immediately confronted by a staff member that tells them that the police want to perform an autopsy on Phoebe. Len, Phoebe's dad, pushed back and said that that was not something that they had wanted done to her body. The staffer held firm and told him that the police had ordered it, and the only person who could object anyway was the senior next of kin. Hearing this, her mom, Natalie, informed the person that she was Phoebe's mom, and Len standing next to her was Phoebe's dad, so obviously they were automatically her senior next of kin. They were shocked when the staffer informed them that Aunt had already legally registered as senior next of kin, since he was in a de facto relationship with Phoebe. This infuriated Len and Natalie. Phoebe had just died, and for Aunt to take legal action to control how her remains were handled was unbelievable. They had only been in a relationship for a little over a year, and it was always a tenuous one. They couldn't even count the number of times they had broken up. There were so many. Len immediately called Aunt from the morgue, and his mom answered. She told him that Aunt had wanted an autopsy so he could find out what happened. When I first read this while doing research, I was very surprised. What court would give an on-again, off-again boyfriend legal authority over his girlfriend's body, over her parents? Then I learned who Aunt's dad was. His dad is Professor George Hempel and was a Supreme Court Justice in Australia for 17 years. He is also the president of the International Institute of Forensic Studies. To put it mildly, he is a very big deal in the world of the Australian judicial system. We will see as the case moves forward how Aunt, through his father, influences not only the investigation, but also the inquest and the eventual legal outcome. The family was horrified when they saw Phoebe's body. To them, it bore little resemblance to her in life. She was badly battered and bruised. And looking through the glass window at the morgue, even though this body looked like Phoebe, without a spark of life, they found it hard to believe it was really her. They left together. The topic of conversation was how Aunt could be her senior next of kin, when they had only shared an apartment for 14 months and Phoebe had paid rent. Now, according to Australian law, a de facto relationship has to meet certain criteria. Usually the parties have to live together for at least 2 years, have a sexual relationship, have joint ownership of property, and both parties are committed to a shared public life. Remember, to this point, Aunt had not seen Phoebe. He never looked at her in the rubbish room when he was asked to, nor did he go to the morgue to view and identify the body. which he should have as senior next of kin. This is an important point, which we will get into later. Strangely, during the days following Phoebe's death, Ant had put a call out to his and Phoebe's female friends. He encouraged them to come over to his apartment. He called it an open-door policy, and when the girls would arrive at Ant's apartment, Ant's mom would inform them not to mention Phoebe in front of Ant. She had created a kind of rotating roster of day and night shifts to look after Ant's well-being. His mother was reportedly afraid to leave him on his own. Ant's mother was there most days, while the girls took turns comforting him in the evening until he fell asleep. As strange as this sounds, Ant's demeanor was even stranger. At times he would seem completely normal, going about his life as usual, as if nothing even happened. But then suddenly, if law enforcement was present, he would lapse into the fetal position, hugging a cushion, and be inconsolable. One close friend commented that he had never seen anything like it, and questioned the soundness of Ant's mind. The garbage had also begun to pile up since no one was allowed to discuss any refuse-related matters around Ant, and one of the girls just took it upon herself to be the garbage lady. She was the only one allowed to visit the 12th floor rubbish room to dispose of it. On Sunday afternoon, Phoebe's family, consisting of Len, Natalie, Tom, Nick, Jeanette, and Lucy, visited Ant at his apartment at the Balancia. When they arrived, they were surprised to see the amount of people in Ant's apartment. There were already 6 people there, but Ant was nowhere to be seen. He was holed up in his bedroom with his stepmother's father-in-law, who was a doctor. Ant refused to come out of the room. Phoebe's family was introduced to Kate Rowland, a friend of Ant's who was a wedding and event planner. Before the family was even able to sit down, Kate started to discuss the funeral arrangements for Phoebe. She told Phoebe's mom, Natalie, that Phoebe had wanted to be cremated and have her ashes spread out into the ocean. So a service by the sea would be appropriate and should feature large baskets of white flowers. And as Ant's mom seconded the idea, Natalie felt like she was going to be sick. She was not ready to discuss the funeral of her daughter with complete strangers, who had already seemed to decide how everything was going to go. While Natalie was having a terrible time at Ant's apartment, the autopsy on Phoebe was underway. It was performed by Dr. Matthew Lynch, who just so happened to be a close friend with Ant's stepmom. She is also a judge like his father. Dr. Lynch notes that the jeans Phoebe was wearing were soaked in blood and they were pulled down below her knees, but her underwear was intact. The right leg of the jeans was badly torn, and the belt used with the jeans had only been passed through a few of the belt loops. According to the toxicology report done on Phoebe's blood, she showed that she had Stilnox in her system, which we talked about earlier as a sleeping aid, the same as Ambien, drug for muscle cramps. Now this may have been a muscle relaxant, but the records are not very specific. Also her normal antidepressants, and strangely cough medicine. Since no mention has been made by anyone indicating Phoebe was sick or had a cough, I'm taking this to mean the cough syrup was not medicinal, but possibly recreational. The use of cough medicine to get high being popular with young people. She also had a blood alcohol content of 0.16. This, based on her body weight, puts her at twice the legal limit for someone to be driving in the U.S. I would speculate at this level and her size, she would definitely appear drunk, but would probably be able to walk and talk coherently. But when you add in the combination of prescription sleeping pills, cough syrup, muscle relaxants, and her own antidepressants, I think it would be very tough for Phoebe to do anything without much assistance, especially loading herself into a garbage chute. But we will get deeper into that later. Now back to the autopsy report. Her right foot was found to be almost completely severed, only attached by a tendon. She had a deep laceration on her right leg, bruising on the elbows and sides of the arms. Most of the findings seem pretty consistent with someone who fell down a 12-story garbage chute. Ant now starts to act even more strange. Based on the petition that he is the senior next of kin, he puts in a claim to receive the $113,000 death benefit that is paid by Australian Social Services to help in burial fees. Upon hearing this news, Phoebe's dad, Len, is incensed. He petitions the court to have the senior next of kin changed to himself, and in so doing, finds out that Ant lied to the court, saying that he and Phoebe had been together for 2 years, that they started dating 2 months before they had even actually met. Len's request is denied by the courts, but it upsets Ant so much that he eventually gives the death benefit to Phoebe's brother and gives his permission to allow Natalie and Len to bury their daughter as they see fit. Naturally, these outrageous legal actions taken by Ant completely alienated him and Phoebe's family. Just prior to them being totally estranged, Ant and Phoebe's parents meet up so he can give them her belongings from the apartment. He claims to be bringing everything that is hers, But when her parents go through the box he gives them, Phoebe's passport, her Medicare card, her birth certificate, her wallet, her laptop, her camera, and all her recent journals that she writes in every day are missing. When Nat and Len get home, they are furious. What right does Aunt have to keep anything of Phoebe's? Finally, after being threatened with another lawsuit, Aunt gives them her wallet and laptop back. The wallet is empty, and none of her official IDs are ever returned. And just to put the icing on the cake, Aunt announces himself on Facebook that Phoebe has committed suicide due to depression and drug abuse. He invites people to her memorial at his apartment, all the while knowing Phoebe's parents have already scheduled her funeral. I'm not kidding. He has a memorial of his own with his friends and doesn't invite Phoebe's parents. He also doesn't attend Phoebe's funeral. Phoebe's funeral is attended by her family and friends. It is a somber affair, but everyone tries to make the best of it by sharing all the great stories they have of her. Her family, being of Norse descent, make a Viking-style boat out of wood. They put letters that they had written to Phoebe, marigold flowers, and her ashes in it, and set it aflame in the Viking style of a funeral. Not too long after the funeral is held, Phoebe's parents get notice from law enforcement that the case is closed and the death has been ruled a suicide. This totally floors the parents, since as far as they are concerned, the investigation has barely started. Law enforcement claims that due to how she died, and the statement from friends and family that she was depressed, and the drugs and alcohol in her system, that the only verdict could be suicide. Phoebe's family isn't the only ones who think this is a rush to judgment. Her friends in the news media quickly begin calls for another investigation. They point to the facts that there was no suicide note, her computer was never even looked at by law enforcement. They also never reviewed the CCTV camera footage from the apartment complex, since they waited too long to request it. They only interviewed a handful of witnesses that may have seen Phoebe on her last day. They had not yet held an inquest, which in Australia is an official finding of fact and is normal procedure in a death, and did no practical analysis on the garbage chute to see whether or not Phoebe could even have entered the chute without help. To this point, there was so much speculation after the cause of death was announced by suicide of garbage chute that the manufacturer of the chute system used in the apartment complex came forward and provided private investigators for Phoebe's family with an identical garbage chute setup to test if someone could put themselves in the chute in the manner she did. Now remember, the chute itself is located 3 feet up on the wall of the 12th floor refuse room. It is made of stainless steel and resembles the front of a mailbox. It is 14 inches wide, about the width of a laptop, and 8 inches tall. It is made of stainless steel and has a weighted spring-loaded handle. That means if you were to stop pulling on the handle, it would snap back into the closed position. I have included a picture on the website if you want to get a better idea of what it looks like. Investigators had 2 different women of Phoebe's size, 6'7" and about 105 pounds, try to force themselves down the chute. Remember, she did not do this face first as if she was diving into the chute. She went in feet first, facing the wall. Now, it was almost impossible for these girls to do it. One reason was that once they had one foot or leg in the chute, there was nothing to hold on to get their other foot in, and the opening was very narrow. They were also unable to place their arms at their side, as the coroner states in his report that Phoebe did. They also had to use the area around the chute to prop themselves up and to push themselves inside. Now, this would have left a lot of fingerprints, yet law enforcement found none on the chute that Phoebe used. Women who tested the chute were also totally sober and very athletic. 2 things we know that at the time of her death, Phoebe was not. When the investigators tried to put the women in the chute themselves, they found that they were able to do so very easily, by holding down the chute door with one hand and pushing the tester in with the other. Now, we can only imagine how much easier it would have been had the testers been half asleep, as we think Phoebe probably would have been. Now, if you are interested, I will post a link to the video of the testing on the website, so you can watch it for yourself. Now, does this prove that Phoebe was murdered? No. But it does raise serious questions about law enforcement's finding of a suicide, and in the least, highlights how the investigation was flawed. In an effort to get the investigation restarted, Phoebe's family came up with a list of demands regarding the investigation. They wanted to know what was found on Aunt's and Phoebe's computers, her phone records, CCTV footage, what was their actual time of death, all the recorded key fob information, what was found in the broken glass in her apartment, whose blood was on the broken glass, and was there anyone in the apartment complex that didn't belong there during the time that Phoebe was unaccounted for? These are all legitimate requests, and the police should have had no problem providing answers, since these are all things that they should have already looked into. The police tell them no. They will give them no information. The case is closed. So since the case is closed, the family demands the return of Phoebe's laptop. The police finally give it back and find that all her emails have been deleted. Now, let's talk about the cell phone for a minute, Phoebe's iPhone. Now, remember Ant had claimed that he was taking her iPhone in for repair? Well, this story changes a number of times regarding that, and to this day, Phoebe's parents have never received her phone back. Time passes, and with no help from police, Phoebe's family have run out of avenues to investigate. The newspapers run some stories regarding her death. A few people come forward with stories of how they thought they saw strange-looking people around the apartment, also about how inaccurate that the key fob system was. And the news actually ran a story about how if you knew where to go, you could easily enter the apartment complex and use the elevators without a key fob. In fact, they interviewed actual residents of the Balancia that stated that they had been complaining about the inadequacies of the key fob system for years, but they were ignored. Finally, Phoebe's family had had enough. With donations, they hired their own pathologist to go over the autopsy's photos and findings, and he came back to them with very different conclusions than what the first coroner had found. He found that Phoebe had unexplained injuries to her head. She had bruising on the right side of her jawbone and subdural bleeding on the left side of her brain. Now, these injuries were consistent with being struck on the side of her face with sufficient force to knock the left side of her head against a solid object, such as a wall. This injury could very well have caused unconsciousness. She also had an abrasion on the outside of her head over her left ear, which is consistent with striking the wall. Now, these injuries were noted and were obvious in the original autopsy photos, and they were even commented on by the coroner, but he did not include these in his legal findings. For some reason, he clearly misrepresented the condition of her body. He would know that such injuries were unexplained by her fall, and they were consistent with a physical attack. In addition, the second forensic analysis showed circular ovoid bruises on her right medial upper arm. Now, these are consistent with grip marks, also bruising to her left wrist and on her neck, just like you would have if you grabbed someone by her wrist and neck and stuffed them down a garbage chute. So what really happened to Phoebe? Now, are we to believe, as law enforcement would have us, that a 105-pound woman, twice over the legal limit, with prescription sleeping pills, muscle relaxants, and cough syrup in her system, was able to perform a feat of gymnastic skill that resulted in her death? Or is the answer much more evil and calculating? Did a jealous boyfriend with powerful parents finally decide that he had had enough of his young, troubled free spirit of a girlfriend? Well, here's how I see it. Now, a quick disclaimer, this is just my opinion, okay? Just my opinion. Ant, after having been snubbed and almost cheated on by Phoebe once again, decides he's had enough. But he cannot just let her go. No, he has shown time and again that he needs to possess and control Phoebe. He cannot simply break up with her. He needs to make it so she can never date again. Now, this may seem unbelievable to you and me, but I think Ant has lived so long in his little world where he calls the shots that for him, this is not that far of a leap. And he has a number of things working in his favor. First, Phoebe is troubled after all. No one's going to dispute that. She has documented instances of depression and substance abuse, including self-harm. Ant knows that he just needs the right moment, and unfortunately, Phoebe provides him with it. Remember, on the day before her death, Phoebe had sent out that crazy text to her family about eating tomato soup at the hospital, and she was also sleeping off a nasty drunk from the day before. Now, we have only Ant's testimony that he took away the Stilnox sleeping tablets like a good boyfriend. But we know this is not true since traces of the drug were found in her blood. I think Ant kept her drugged and quiet throughout the night of Wednesday the 1st. Then he went to work on the 2nd, knowing what he would do when he got home. I think he arrived home at 6:09, went straight to his apartment, and found Phoebe either still sleeping or just waking up, still dressed for bed. He made her a drink, probably spiked with sleeping tablets and muscle relaxants, and she drank it, or he forced her. Now, this resulted in the broken glass on the floor and the damage to her jaw and the side of her head. He then ordered her to dress, put on her jeans, which she didn't want to, so he forced them on her, which is why the belt was only through 1 or 2 loops when she was found. The medication she was given would have started to work by now, and he would have begun walking/carrying her over to the garbage room. This room is not viewable from the apartment's hallway. They would have been in the room alone together. Investigators have shown how easy it is for a man of Ant's size to lift and force a person into the garbage chute. In the process, her pants, which are barely on anyway, fall down. And since she probably has no idea what is happening by now, that is the condition in which they find her. Once he has sent her down the chute, his job is done. He wipes off the area around the chute, goes back to his apartment, and orders takeout. Orders takeout? Why? Why would he do this? Now, he and Phoebe are meeting her father for dinner soon. You see, ordering that takeout allows for him to be in the lobby when Phoebe's body is found. He knows that a body in the garbage chute is going to cause all kinds of chaos. The delivery boy who arrives with his food gives him the excuse he needs to head down to the lobby. Without him, he would have to sit in his apartment and wait for law enforcement to come to him. And based on how inept they turn out to be, that could be ages. By going down to the lobby and being the helpful boyfriend, he establishes a cooperative relationship with law enforcement right off the bat. What a coincidence that he just happens to be picking up food delivery when his girlfriend is found in the trash compactor. From that point on, he controls the narrative. He establishes his own timeline. He explains who Phoebe was. He relays her depression and substance abuse history right away. Some of the first words he says to law enforcement is that his girlfriend was depressed and was she the one that committed suicide. He also has the attorney file for senior next of kin that very evening. Now remember, Phoebe is found at 7 p.m. For a distraught boyfriend, Ant works really fast. He also never ever sees her body after she dies. He refuses at the crime scene, never goes to the morgue, and refuses to view pictures at future court proceedings. He also avoids her family at every turn, using his own family to block them. Now we find this out later down the road, but 2 days after her death, his father, the Supreme Court judge, picks up Phoebe's iPhone from a fix-it shop in Melbourne and pays cash. The owner of the shop comes out much later, after the case is closed, and tells Phoebe's family that he had wiped the phone clean. Every official involved in the case, including the pathologist, the investigators, and the inquiry judge, have links, either personal or professional, to Ant's family. So what do you think? Do you think Anthony Hempel got away with murder in the death of Phoebe Handsjuk? Well, I think you know how I think. But if you're still unsure, let me leave you with this news report from the Daily Star of Australia. Now, this is dated December 13th, 2019. This is 5 years after Phoebe died. Murder cops will investigate the death of an Australian model following a long fight by her heartbroken family. Bailey Schneider, 25, was found dead on the kitchen floor of her parents' home in Melbourne on June the 24th of 2018. A gold cord was wrapped tightly around her neck, but it did not appear to have been attached to anything to indicate that she had hung herself. Despite this, police have ruled her death as suicide. Her mom and dad, Cameron and Sabine Schneider, and sister Lily, have never believed that she took her own life, and have campaigned to have an official investigation into her death. Bailey had been in a relationship with 52-year-old Melbourne promoter Ant Hempel, who is the son of a former Supreme Court justice at the time of her death. It is believed that Ant had broken up with Bailey the day prior to her body being found, strangled, at her parents' house. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.